This is Philip Sevy, and you're listening to a special episode of Power of X-Men.
Boom, what is up, Familia Dayspring here, and we have such an incredible episode of Power of X-Men. We have X-Men artist Philip Sevy on the podcast today, and we dive deep into their career from Tomb Raider all the way through to their work on Astonishing X-Men. And Familia, I have to tell you, this is one of those episodes where it's such a joy to edit. And this is what I wanted to accomplish when we started Power of X-Men years ago during lockdown in the pandemic. It's having conversations with the talent behind the X books, see their career, see their journey, get their feels on these characters. So this episode with Philip, I am just so incredibly proud of. And they have such an incredible story. I am so proud to have them on Power of X-Men. So sit back and enjoy this conversation with Philip Sevy. I cannot believe it has been 30 years since the Generation X TV movie. Do you remember, Philip, where you were at when you saw it?
Yeah, I believe I watched it at my grandparents' house for some reason, but then we recorded it onto VHS because it was like an X-Men TV event of which we were starved for, and then watched it repeatedly for years. But it got to the point, like in my adulthood, I was like, did I hallucinate that? No one talked about it for like decades, and then I found all sorts of people online, and obviously it's on YouTube, but there was that moment of like, was that actual real? Was Matt Frewer really in a X-Men TV movie?
Philip, I have been trying to get Matt on the podcast because we've had some of the actors over the years, because much like you, I watched it and it was like a fever dream, and I loved it. I know we have Refrax and Buff in lieu of Chamber and Page. Mm-hmm. However, I don't know. There was just something magical about seeing that on like Fox back in the day.
Yeah. No, it was very cool. And it has bizarre like day glow shot like a Saturday afternoon sci-fi show. Like there's a very of the moment aspect of it, but at the time it was the coolest thing, and I watched it over and over again.
Finola Hughes as Emma Grace Frost.
So good.
Hand to God. I think that is the best Emma we have ever gotten out 100%. There in other media. Yeah. No disrespect to January Jones, although because I love January Jones's like Instagram feed, but Finola Hughes ate that role.
Oh yeah, absolutely nailed it. Best embodiment of Emma we've seen so far.
Who's your favorite Generation X character? I have a theory based off of Astonishing X-Men, but I want to know directly from your mouth.
You know, that one is tough, and I'm trying to think. Like, doing Astonishing, I got to really love Paige and Skin. Obviously, I really love Chamber, just the design of Chamber, and I only got to do a tiny bit of Chamber. I'm a big Sync fan and didn't really get to use Sync much either. The Phalanx Covenant was one of my biggest jams as a kid. I bought all the issues and collected the whole crossover, and I think I got my mom to sew me a Banshee costume based on that that I wore around. Like a huge fan. I mean, I loved Blink, and Blink dies in that crossover, and then we get to see her back in Age of Apocalypse just a short time later. So. Like those kids in general, like there was something about like obviously the Chris Bachalo designs and just that energy and the chaos of it that was really, really cool. So I mean, these days probably Paige. Like I grew to really love Paige over here, and it's not like I didn't love her before. I just didn't have the same amount of connection I had after working for however long I worked on that book, like a year and a half, something like that.
My theory was Paige. Because, I mean, she is a star in so many ways, but there was just something about the way you drew her, and it's not, we kind of talk about Paige a lot on this podcast because we just got the Marvel Legends page from Generation X, and, I hate saying this like this where Paige is typically not seen as an A-list X-Man, but for me, she's an A-lister because of Phalanx Covenant, because of that Generation X, because of that morning jog she had where she tore off her skin. And I I think we're in the same boat that probably Generation X just hit us at the right moment in our upbringing because they were so cool. Like for me, they were the older kids I wanted to be.
Yeah, very much so. It was very much kind of the right place and the right time, and that came out right as the comics market was starting to like have a downturn. So all the comic stores around me shut down around that time. So I wasn't able to collect it as easily as like Phalanx Covenant and Age of Apocalypse, which I know came afterwards, but I could go to like a drugstore and find Age of Apocalypse easier than Generation X. So it was fun to go back a couple years later and buy like the first 20 issues in quarter bins and kind of go back and read all the stuff that I really wanted to read as a kid, but it was just availability was more difficult at that moment.
Yeah, that was one of the conversations that I've always seen about the comic book industry was accessibility, availability. I grew up in Miami and we had line drive beeper and comics, which was half beepers and half comic books. And then exactly what you're saying, when the shutdown happened for a lot of comic books, the accessibility was very limited. Mm-hmm. And it was only until Morrison, when they took over New X-Men, was I able, and I had a car, I was able to go to Borders back when Borders existed and get my comics. Borders was delayed. I don't think they got things on Wednesdays, but I have to tell you, I think one of the most traumatic things of my childhood was Line Drive Beeper and comics closing because I would get my Fleer Ultra 94s from there and the Generation X Phalanx, or excuse me, the Phalanx Covenant covers. Oh my God, I can still see them on display, and then to see that closed down, it was traumatic.
Yeah, I had all the stores that, again, X-Men Series 1 and 2 trading cards, the entire Extinction Agenda, all of that stuff that I bought. Not Extinction Agenda, Executioner Song. That was my intro point. Yeah, they all shut down after a couple years, and I was, going to like Thrifty, which is essentially like a Rite Aid or a CVS, and they had comics, or Fedco was this weird like proto Costco place had comics, and Ralph's the grocery store, like any place I could find them, but they were not as accessible until a couple years later. I grew up in California. I moved from Southern California to Northern California, and in Northern California found more local actual shops and was able to dive back in, and that really kind of set my course going forward was getting back into shops.
First of all, I always have this thing of people who grew up in California. I on top of being an insane fan of your work, the fact that you're from California, I'm just looking at you with like with this adoration because I think California in the 90s and early aughts, oh my god, the vibe, And I always think of like Image and Wildstorm and those Dark Horse Buffy comics and Buffy, of course, in general, but
yeah.
I really do miss, by the way, sidebar. We don't have Ralph's here on the East Coast, but we do have something called Publix. I don't know if you've heard of Publix.
I've been to Publix before.
Yeah, and I would get my pub subs and croqueticas, and my abuela would be like, you can get one comic book, and be like, ay, gracias, abuela. And for me, it was so magical, and you don't really get that anymore, sadly. But on the upswing about that, just to kind of like butt in that conversation, the accessibility now. Mm-hmm. For comic books, I mean, all you have to do is download Marvel Unlimited, and you're good.
Yeah, it's great that there is an entire digital marketplace that can give people who don't have access to local comic book stores. And I feel like, coming out of the mid-'90s into the early 2000s, into the mid-aughts, you had a lot more shops pop up. And there's been up and downs over the time, but I think in every major area, there's a couple very much stores that have a lot of foothold in the pop culture of the area. So I've yet to be without a comic store in a long time, but I'm glad in those like areas where there's not kind of a hub, there are easy ways to access comics, and it really has kind of helped change. And obviously, things like Scholastic book fairs and Target for, middle grade and young adult graphic novels. We were talking ahead of time and offline. I spent the weekend in Savannah, Georgia at my alma mater. I went to SCAD, which is the Savannah College of Art and Design. They have the oldest degree awarding program of sequential art in the country. I think they started in the late 80s. And getting a chance to talk to all the, sophomores, juniors, seniors there, and then some grad students as well. Like these were the kids who grew up reading, like Raina Telgemeier's books or Dave Pilkey's Captain Underpants and Dogman, and now so many of them are interested and kind of have like the the Penguin Random House or Scholastic's graphic novel focus of their careers, and to see kind of the industry shift from when I was there 15 years ago. Everyone wanted to do mainstream comics. And now everyone is very much looking at like, graphic novels and mid-grade and young adult and webtoon, and the things that were accessible when they were kids and got them into comics is where they want to go. So now that, mainstream, big two, licensed work, whatever we want to call it, is, across the digital storefronts and platforms between Marvel Unlimited and DC Infinite, and pick your poison as far as digital comics reader. Hopefully, that will continue to increase a new generation of creators growing up who now have access to that stuff.
It's, and it just occurred to me as you were talking, because it's even beyond the accessibility, it's also this horrible stigma that comic books and graphic novels have had to overcome.
Mm-hmm.
Because when I was growing up, it was all about, graphic novels, comic books, those aren't really real. And you were kind of like the outliers reading them.
Mm-hmm.
And when I used to work in book publishing, I was at HarperCollins and the Hachette Book Group. And I would always go and try to advocate for a graphic novel. And always, and I was in the industry for about 10 years, and I started off in '06. And always they were like, it's too expensive to produce. Who reads graphic novels? That's a niche market. And as I was exiting, they were adapting How to Kill a Mockingbird, for example, into a graphic novel, and they were seeing the success with that. And a lot of these literary books that now became graphic novels, so now you have your own original graphic novels, graphic memoirs, which is such an upswing. I'm so glad to see that, because I think, and I guess I am being biased, but I think graphic novel storytelling, especially what artists like you do, is so incredibly important for storytelling, and it's such a unique way of telling a story that I think it's the best. For me, I love like just getting a brand new graphic novel and just reading it and seeing the art, following along. It truly is the best medium out there.
Yeah, it's a very unique art form, and I think it's obviously much more appreciated and understood than it used to be, and I'm so glad kind of the acceptance across the board has risen. But there's an aspect of kind of the interactivity and individuality of the reading experience of comics. Like, no two-person reads or experiences the story the same way, because it's an audience participatory art form, where I think Grant Morrison has talked a lot about that, even explored it in some of their comics. But like, how fast you move through a page, what order you read the pages, going back and forth, and all that stuff is very unique and individual to the person who reads it and experiences it, and it's very unlike anything else.
Grant Morrison, they had this wonderful line, because there's this issue of New X-Men where they go to the Hellfire Club, and Sebastian Shaw says, I was rummaging through your head and felt Emma. And, that was a continuity mistake that, Sebastian Shaw does not have telepathy. And Morrison, they said, if you don't like what was written on the page, you can grab your pencil, scratch it out, and write what you want. And now you have a unique experience with the artist and with the writer. And it's something for you as a reader. And I thought, that was like a mind-blowing moment as a reader. And I must have been in like I was like probably 19 when I read that quote. And it helped shape how I approach comics.
Yeah, very much so. I want to say it's in their multiversity issue with Frank Quietly, where the essentially Dr. Manhattan character is talking about essentially being able to flip things back and forth through time in kind of a two-dimensional way that he perceives reality. And it's all just about the experience of reading a comic. And, anything Grant writes is incredible and just so well, just a different headspace, and really opens up kind of what the possibilities of a story can be.
So you were 9 years old when you got that first issue of Jim Lee X-Men? Do I have that right? Okay.
You do, yeah.
What was that experience like, grabbing that comic book for the first time? And that was sort of the impetus for your love of drawing, or maybe drawing comics.
Yeah, no, 100%. Like, I've always been a big superhero and comics fan. The first memory I have involves Secret Wars action figures when I was 2 years old. An Iron Man and a Magneto toy. I got them as a gift. First memory I have. and so like had those toys growing up. Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends cartoon was on. Pride of the X-Men happened, and I loved it. And every week I would turn in for episode 2, and it would never come. It didn't take till years later where I realized it was a failed pilot. Then X-Men '92. So I'm very much aware buying the action figures off the racks, things like that. But I was walking through my mall in San Diego and came across a comic book store, and they just had a stack of X-Men #1s in the front window display, and I was like, oh my god, X-Men #1! It's a new #1. I gotta buy it. I can jump on and make $1 million. Is how I sold it to my mom. Yeah, little do we know.
I love that you were a salesperson even then.
Yep. But yeah, no, I bought it that night. I read it, and it coming into comics with that issue, it's a terrible entry point issue because it makes no sense whatsoever without any context. I was completely lost in everything other than like I loved the art, and obviously I knew some of the characters from the cartoon. And yeah, I sat that night when I was 9. I was like, I'm going to draw comic books. That's all I want to do the rest of my life. And that pretty much, here we are now. Let's just say, a little bit more than 30 years later, and I'm getting to draw comic books. So yeah.
Yeah, that first issue, and I can't remember how I got that first issue. I either got it for free because for the familia at home who may or may not know, Jim Lee's X-Men is shipped like 8 million copies, and it was so popular. They were at all the comic book stores, and comics were like $1.99 back in the day. And I just remember it was kind of like Mona Simpson when she has that psychedelic moment when she sees the football player's hair from The Simpsons come out and shaggy, and that's how I felt seeing that. And for me, it was also the Fleer Ultra of Rogue.
Oh yeah,
#2, which I thought at the time, and again it was the early '90s. I hadn't seen art like that, and I think it was more where my love started stemming from was that I was lost going into it, and I wanted to know more.
Oh yeah.
And you have to be your own little archaeologist. And I tell this to everyone, being 9 years old and trying to understand Jean Grey, the Phoenix, and Madeline Pryor.
When I came in, it was Executioner song had just happened. Even though I bought X-Men #1, it was like 2 years old at this point. So like it took me a year of finding like the blue polybagged issues and then reading them in order to put together. But that's Cable, and that's Jean, and that's Maddie, and that's Apocalypse, and that is going back to Rachel Summers. That is just an insane amount of continuity over the last 15 or 20 years tied together. So I'm buying X-Men cards, and I'm grabbing Wizard magazines and Encyclopedia of Marvel, at bookstores, and trying to piece it all together, and it was the coolest thing. So whenever someone's like, oh, people don't want to read a comic unless they get a new #1 because of continuity, I was like, hell no, like continuity was the coolest thing to figure out, to like, who is this and where do they come from and why does this matter? Like that was so much the fun of superhero comics for me as a kid in the 90s.
I'm right there with you. I am a continuity buff. And I love the source material. I actually love the comics. That's where the passion starts. All right, so you're in San Diego, and then you start drawing. Your mom buys you that issue, and you make good on your word, and then you start showing at San Diego Comic-Con, right? Because it's in your backyard.
Yes.
You can just pop in, and that was around the late '90s, was it? Did you just start going to?
Yeah, I started going in '97, I believe, and it was one of those like, was only vaguely aware it was happening, and then went one day. My best friend growing up and I just his mom dropped us off because we lived about a half hour outside of downtown, and we just walked up, filled out a form, got our badges, 2 14-year-olds, and just walked in and blew my mind. It was like, what is this? I found my happy place.
Philip, that's not how San Diego's supposed to work. I've only gone to San Diego as an adult, and unfortunately, I have to do that lottery, which is I never win. I always have to end up putting up like a media pass. What was the vibe like? And you're bringing you're 14 and you're bringing a portfolio.
So I brought a portfolio. It was either a year or 2 later. I was just before I turned 16, so that would have been
That's still
99.
Young.
Yeah, still 2 years. So going to it back then, yeah. nowadays you have halls A through H and then spillover events all around the city because it's so maxed to capacity. In 97 there was halls A through C was the only halls the convention center was taking up for the show. And it was just like a big basement fun, like just long boxes everywhere and some like 1960s sci-fi actors signing autographs in the corner, but it was all just comics. Media hadn't really invaded San Diego yet. I was there the years where like the whole cast of Lord of the Rings showed up and Arnold Schwarzenegger promoting Terminator 3 and Jennifer Garner and Ben Affleck promoting Daredevil. Like I was there a couple years down the road, but yeah. So '99, I brought my first portfolio around, reading a bunch of Wizard magazine. At that point, I was back into buying comics regularly. I put together a portfolio of Top Cow characters because at the time Top Cow was all I wanted to work for. They were the shit.
Listen. Midnight Nation, Hunter Killer.
Yeah.
I love Top Cow. Cyberforce.
Yep.
Sorry.
Yeah, this was like I think Fathom was out at the time. '99 Tomb Raider had just dropped, and it was everything I loved. Dave Finch, Mike Turner, Andy Park. Those were all my artistic heroes. Obviously, Mark Silvestri. So I put together this Ascension. It was an Ascension portfolio piece, like the Dave Finch, Matt Banning series that only existed back in the day. And I got like a little ticket from Top Cow. I just ran up to their booth and asked them when they were doing portfolio reviews, and I came back and set my portfolio down. It's not like I was necessarily confident, but at the same time I was like, oh, obviously I'm going to get hired. We'll say that didn't happen. I have never been more torn apart in my life than that portfolio review. It was obviously like reservedly so. It was real bad, but at the same time I was not prepared for the level of just absolutely shredded I got. I have never had a harsher portfolio review than that time when I was 15 years old.
It wasn't Mark himself who no, whoever the talent scout was for Top Cow at the time. Okay, because I would be heartbroken if it was Mark Silvestri.
No, all the times I've ever interacted with Mark and hung out with him, he is the coolest guy, which is so nice to hear and experience.
Him and Bridget, I listen. I love Mark Silvestri very much, but it's Bridget that I'm the big stan of because she talks a lot about her Pomeranians, and I had two, and we've bonded over that grief. But anyways, continue. So, by the way, I love getting harsh feedback in my own work because at least there's a place to go up. If it comes from a good place where someone's actively trying to give you advice to be better, not someone who's going to name call you. So do you think when you look back on that, especially since you were like 16, 17, when you got that harsh feedback, do you think it helped shape you as an artist? I mean, obviously, spoiler warning to your younger self, it worked out.
Eventually made it. I think what that did at least was kind of mentally prepare me for the levels of feedback and critique you can get and start to get comfortable in that discomfort. Because like I said, I never got a harsher critique going forward, and it's not like it took me years and years and years later till I actually broke into comics, another 15 years at that point. But I think that it at least got me like, oh, okay, like there's more things to think of and consider than just like I put a number 2 pencil down on a piece of paper and magic happens. And it was many years of study and learning and figuring out how I learned and adapting how to serve my learning style in a way that helped me grow and get better. Because all teenage years and going forward for a long time, it was just like, oh, if I just draw a lot, I'll get better. And turns out, no, you won't really get better if you just draw a lot. There's actually a lot of study and learning and practice that goes into that needs some sort of structure and some sort of focus. But it took me far too long to start to figure that out.
And so you go from showing your portfolio at San Diego, and then is that you graduate? I'm assuming you graduate, and then you go to Savannah. Is that the?
It's a little bit longer than that actually. So into my late teens, I was showing stuff at San Diego, and I had started mailing some samples in. I've got a stack of rejection letters somewhere from back in the old snail mail days. And then,
I miss a good rejection letter.
I got to dig them up. I've got DC, Marvel, Top Cow, a couple.
You got to frame them.
I used to have them up above my bed when I was younger, so I could stare at them when I went to bed when I was like 18 or 19. Yeah.
In my first, I studied writing in college, and I would submit to all the literary publishers, and I got all my stacks of rejection, and I framed them with the cheap, Michaels frames, and I put them all over my bathroom because I thought they were shit, but.
Whatever you can do to motivate.
Yeah.
No, so as I got a little bit older, I got scared, both like internally, but then also like the pressure of telling people around me, people I was dating or family members of stuff, trying to impress them to be like, oh, no one's going to understand or think, wanting to do comics is cool. So I went to my undergrad and I got an undergraduate degree in corporate finance. And I worked for
Wow.
Goldman Sachs for a couple of years in the mid 2000s. And I realized like, oh man, I hate this so much.
That's a
Like
soul killer. That will kill
yeah,
your soul.
I was there from 2007 to 2010, so right when we helped crash the economy. And I
Yeah,
say
thanks for
we as
that.
Goldman Sachs, yeah.
Yeah,
I
thanks for
had nothing to do
that.
with that, but I was doing like administrations and operations, but at the same time, still, like, I realized during that, I was like, oh, I'm making the world a worse place every day by working here.
I,
I need
I
to get out of here.
I had just moved to New York when the market crashed,
Okay.
and my parents immediately cut me off. They were always like, "Oh, we're going to help you when you move to New York, blah blah blah." Which when you're 22, and the market crashed, that's it. I was out
Oof.
on my own, and I actually was working at Wizard magazine at the
Oh,
time,
okay.
and I was my gas and to house my car,
Mhm.
garage for my car, cost more probably than what I was making. So it was horrible, but it builds character when
Yeah.
you're in those situations. And so, okay, so the market crashes, and you're like, I
Yeah,
need to do something better with my life.
100%. I need to tell stories. I need to get back to what I wanted to do. So I started a web comic just as a way to get back into drawing and comics, and got me back into like local events and got me
Was
going
that
back to
the first
shows. And
hero?
it is a web comic called Heartless Dark, which hopefully does not exist anywhere.
No,
I
I'm
think
Googling now as we speak. Heartless Dark.
there's
Uh,
maybe some pieces on my old Deviant art, but the website no longer
I
is available.
miss the days when DeviantArt was the shit. Do you remember going on like DeviantArt and searching for like Lord of the Rings fan, art and Buffy fan art and just I miss DeviantArt so
Oh
much.
yeah.
No, it's not coming up, so you're safe.
Yeah, no, it's not problematic. It's just bad, at least as
Yeah.
far as I can remember. I have some printed copies somewhere, but yeah, it just got me back into shows. And when I was at San Diego Comic Con one year, I was introduced to another artist who was like, I was like, oh, how did you get into comics? He was like, well, I started my career going to SCAD, this art college, and they have a degree in comics. And I was like, oh, that's what I need. That
Gotcha.
is like, if someone can show me how to do something once, I can take off. But at the time, I had the hardest time just teaching myself things. I couldn't just pick up a book and by reading a book suddenly learn how to be a better artist. So I applied to the graduate program. I got accepted, went there from 2010 to 2012, really kind of whipped myself into shape. Still not published ready, but I was so much better by the time I graduated. And by that point, I had started to figure out how to teach myself. So for the years afterwards, I now had the skills and understood how I absorbed information to break down problems I was facing and figure out where to go and how to make them better and stronger. So yeah, after graduation, a couple years later is when I did the first Hero with Action Lab, and then I broke in through the Top Cow talent hunt a couple months later as one of the runner-ups in 2014. So I kind of I got to
Yeah.
start at Top Cow, which is kind of like, full circle as to where I wanted to do when I first started showing my portfolio years earlier. And that kind of got the ball rolling from there.
Was Renee Geerlings your editor, or had she
Um,
left by that time?
she had left at that point, but she was one of the editors, not the harsh one, but one of the editors who, when I was a teenager showing my work, would give me
Yeah.
feedback and give me sample scripts and give me photocopies of penciled pages to look at how their artist did stuff. So I got to run into Renee a couple years later while I was working at Top Cow and be like, when I was a little kid, you gave me a lot of help and were super kind and encouraging. And she was like, oh, that's so nice to hear. It was good to talk to her. But yeah, she had moved on by that point.
She hired me as an intern at Top Cow back in the day. I ended up not going to LA. I stayed on the East Coast, but I love her very much for
Yeah.
that reason. And okay, but so you came runner up, and then that's when they started hiring you for Aphrodite 9,
Yeah,
and you
more or
did
less. Yeah.
some one shots there. I
Yep.
love Top Cow.
Yeah.
What was can you just describe the vibe at Top Cow? For me, there was no like a lot of like life changing books. Midnight Nation is the first one that comes to mind for me.
Yeah.
I mean, it changed just so much of me. I
Oh, yeah.
love Top Cow. I mean, for
Yeah.
me, it's just like that would have been my dream publishing house to have worked at. What was the vibe like?
Yeah, I mean, I'm same with you. Midnight Nation is my favorite comic book of all time.
Oh, really?
I own like complete sets of the singles and multiple trades. I will talk about it endlessly anywhere.
Can we have you
Yeah.
back on the pod to do a Midnight Nation like
Oh,
break down?
100%.
Okay, good.
100%. And we can cry as we talk about that book because it is one
Oh,
of the best books of all time.
I
It is
don't.
so good.
During lockdown, when I was just starting Power of X-Men, I'm sorry to
Hmm.
deviate the conversation.
No?
I did an Instagram live at midnight to talk about Midnight Nation
Oh,
and
man.
explain what Midnight Nation was about the
Yeah.
people who are. Oh, I'm going to get so emotional thinking about it. It's like the people who feel that have been left behind.
Yep.
And at the end, that beautiful ending where
Hmm.
there's hope.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my God. Anyways, but yes, Midnight Nation. Sorry, I did not
The
know that. We've
best.
never spoken about Midnight
We
Nation.
haven't. No, it is. Yeah, I preach the gospel of Midnight Nation. It is one of the best things ever made.
And he
But
wrote it because he was like walking around L.A. after he escaped an occult or something, right?
yes,
Again,
pretty
this is
much.
all from memory. Yeah.
He escaped a cult and then started walking all night long every night in downtown San Diego because he was so
Yeah.
mad. And during the process of that, got beat up violently and ended up in the hospital.
Yeah.
And then just was kept walking and started to see the difference of like, oh, in the daylight this city looks like this, but in midnight it looks entirely different. And yeah, went from there. So good.
Oh,
Yeah, Top Cow was awesome. Like I love the people there. It is a smaller operation compared to someone like Dark Horse or Marvel, some of the other people I've worked for. So it very much feels like a family. You've got Uncle Matt, Matt Hawkins. You've got obviously Mark overseeing, and he's become much more involved over the years since I've kind of left. I guess you could say. I just haven't done as much work with him. Like he was working on the Batman Joker project a lot of the time while I was there. But it would be cool. I'd do conventions and go talk to him really quick, and he'd be like, "Here, sit down. Let me show you what I'm working on." This was like years before it was announced, and he'd pull out the first issue on his phone and walk me through the whole story. And it was so cool to see him so excited on that. And he spent 7 or 8 years working on that book, like. And it shows. It is an absolutely gorgeous book. But no, the people who were there were incredible. Like some of my close friends and family all were there. Like Ryan Cady was an assistant editor when I started, and Ryan has gone on to write for all the major companies and is one of my really close friends. The year I was in the Top Cow Talent Hunt, the two winners as far as writing goes was Steve Fox and Teenie Howard.
oh
Like just
wow! Your contemporaries for the X
yeah,
books.
legends and some of my best friends. We talk every day. And Isaac Goodhart was one of the winners in art, and you've had other people like Susan and Tilly Bridges were runner-ups and writers. Ashley Robinson. Just a huge group of people, and I know I'm forgetting a handful already, but there was like a core group, and we've all just kind of like stuck together and nurtured each other through the years. But yeah, I went from like a backup, and then a couple one shots in the Aphrodite 9, and then I drew a couple issues of The Tithe, which was Matt Hawkins' kind of like political religious thriller, which was really fun. And in process of that is when I sent my stuff around and I sent it to an editor I'd known at Dark Horse for a couple of years, and he was like, "Hey, what are you doing right now? I got something really cool that I think would be good for you."
It was
And
Patrick
that's
Thorpe,
when
right?
Patrick Thorpe, yep,
Yeah.
good old Thorpe, Tom Brader as we call him,
Yeah,
because
and it wasn't just any. I'm trying to remember how you explained it, but it wasn't just like you were like, okay, I guess I'll get on the call, and it was for Tomb Raider.
Tomb Raider, yeah, which at that point was no longer with Top Cow, it was now at Dark Horse, but it's
Yeah,
another
yeah,
like
yeah.
Top Cow core property. And yeah, they were relaunching a series, and Mariko Tamaki was writing it. She had just won the Eisner for this one summer,
Yep.
and I was like,
I
"Yeah, I'll
have
do that."
I have this one summer right here.
Yep.
I love. Oh my god, when no lie, when people have kids who are more like YA reading
Mhm.
age, I always recommend this one summer.
Yeah.
Everyone should read that book. So good. Anyways, I'm
No,
sorry. Continue.
no, it's okay. Mariko's amazing. We worked together for 12 issues on that series, and she was great. Like, we would hop on a call at the beginning of an arc and talk about what it was going to be, and the longer we worked together, the more she understood what I liked to do and how I did stuff.
Yeah.
So she would write stuff like, pages 1 through 8, they fight, go for it, Phil. Like, here's some dialogue. I'll go back in and script it later. And she knew, like, oh, I'd love to dig into the storytelling and the pacing and the action and stuff like that. So it got to be very collaborative. In fact, she was leaving the book. When she let us know she was going to leave the book, the next day it was announced, like, the Supergirl miniseries she did and Hulk at Marvel. Like, she had a bunch of just too much stuff going on. And she recommended to the editor that I take over writing the book. She was like, Phil knows what's going on, and they can write this as well as draw it. And that didn't happen, but that meant a lot that an Eisner Award-winning writer was like, yeah, Phil can write this book and draw it at the same time, which is what I wanted to do and what I've done from time to time in my career. And it didn't work out at that point, but it really meant a lot to me as a collaborator to have that kind of trust and support of my work and stuff.
So where do you go after Tomb Raider? You go back to Tomb Raider, right, for the next volume that would come out with the Hive with Colin Kelly and
Yes.
Jackson Lansing.
Yeah,
Also,
yeah. So
your X-Men contemporaries.
yes, no, my good friends. Yeah, I did about a year of creator-owned work at that point.
Hmm.
I did what did I do? I did The House with Drew Zucker, where I wrote it. We got it published. I did a book called Paradox, which was a one shot that I wrote and drew kind of after Tomb Raider's a little decompression. And then I got hired again by Top Cow to do The Freeze at the same time I was hired by Dark Horse to do Tomb Raider Inferno with Jackson and Colin. And yeah, I came back, did a couple issues of that. Love Jackson and Colin. I'm always looking for ways to work together with them. But we do RPGs together. We hang out when we see each other. Like we've kept up over the years fairly regularly. Yeah, and then after that, I did a creator-owned miniseries, Triage, which was kind of like my love letter to '90s comics, in a way. It wasn't exactly like a '90s comic, but it was that big imagination and biggest swings possible type thing.
I don't think
And
I haven't read Triage.
yeah, it came out end of 2019, and then the trade kind of got lost in that COVID diamond interruption and
Oh,
whatnot.
oh,
So
my friend, it's available right now on
yeah.
Kindle. Buy now. I'm reading this after we are done.
Oh man, I hope you
Wow,
like it.
I'm pretty sure I will. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, go for it.
Oh my God, you probably have the career that I think is like the cool, like people get into comics to have a career like yours.
Well, thank you. I mean, hopefully they get into comics to have an even better career. I've enjoyed my career, but comics is sometimes a fight
Well,
to make it working. It's not just breaking in, but staying in is just as hard as breaking in. So yeah, I wrapped that up, and then I did a graphic novel with David Duchovny called Kepler for Dark Horse. He had basically a TV script, a pilot he had written, and Dark Horse was trying to get it made, and they decided they wanted to adapt it, so they brought me in to do the adaptation and the art. And I got to work with him for about a year and a half on it, and he is absolutely the coolest guy, just the nicest creative guy, which was a nice surprise. You never know when you're working with Hollywood people. I've had some experiences that were not great, but this one was fantastic to the point where every now and then Dave still texts me. It's like, "Hey Phil, how's it going?" I'm like, "It's good, Fox Mulder. How are you?" Like, um, and somewhere along the point after that, after I wrapped Kepler, a couple months later is when I finally broke in at Marvel doing X-Men Unlimited, and that's kind of where I've been ever since.
did you hear the cries around the world when Astonishing X-Men came to an end?
Yes, no, as much as I don't, for people who are talking about the work, whether it's on social media or in discords or forums or wherever it is, I would generally try and like see what people were saying, but I never commented or jumped in because I didn't want to interrupt their discussion or enjoyment or anything like that. I didn't want to like insert myself into those discussions. But yeah, I was watching, and we talked, and I talked to other friends and creatives and podcasters who were sad to see the book go. We were sad to see it end too. I think it probably could have gone on a long time if we were given the ability to do so.
When you tackle a big IP like Tomb Raider, like the X-Men, does such a thing for an artist exist like a stage fright? Like, are you afraid just to start? And how do you overcome that process?
Yeah, I think there is a little bit of trepidation in trying to figure out like what is my stamp going to be on this character, but how is that consistent with how it's been? Tomb Raider obviously had external licensors, so there was levels of approval that everything I drew had to go through, and it took a little bit to get the look of Lara right and get kind of what they were looking for. With X-Men, it's trying to figure out like what is my take on this character visually that will be recognizable, but hopefully like stand out a little bit. And that's kind of the trick of always trying to be like, I want people to be able to associate like my work like with a visual distinction, and whether or not and that changes from person to person, right? But yeah, it's trying to figure out like how am I going to tackle this? Like a lot of times I find myself, especially with Astonishing, like what is there since they were in costumes almost none of the time, like what choices am I making about their fashion that makes them a little bit more visually distinct than just like generic t-shirt and jeans? So yeah, hence I'm trying to get everyone in crop tops constantly. I had a panel with Banshee in a crop top,
A
and
nice
my
homage
editor.
to the Phalanx Covenant.
Yep. My editor made me drop the. He's like, "Oh, that's more of a Gambit thing." I was like, "No, I've already drawn Cyclops and Alex in crop tops. Every X-Men deserves to be in a crop top. And maybe did Beast in a crop top too." So
No,
I
not
had to drop
Beast, the
it.
worst character. No, we playfully dislike Beast here at Power of X-Men, even though we just spent like hundreds of dollars on that like Mondo Beast
Oh
that
yeah.
dropped yesterday. But I am curious though, and I'm sorry, this is like a very nuanced, ethereal question, so my apologies for it. But as a reader, I can tell the difference because of artists like you between like Gene and Madeline,
Mhm.
between like Saturn Nine and Courtney Ross. How do you how does one achieve that balance? So I guess is what I'm trying to say. Like, how is it that I'm looking at your Astonishing X-Men and I know that's Paige, I know that's Banshee, especially when you're drawing from a catalog of artists who have interpreted this character not just in recent times but for like decades.
Yeah.
How do you funnel that through to still be recognizable? I'm sorry,
Yeah.
that's a weird question.
No, no, no. It's a valid question, and some of it is instinctual, right? Some of it is not conscious. It is just it's thinking about like what are my favorite takes of this character, or when I think of this character, what stands out. For Banshee, I literally have my Phalanx Covenant issues here that I dug out of my garage when I was hired to draw the book because I went back to like how is Joe Mad drawing it because Joe Mad's the hottest Banshee that's ever been drawn. So what
No
can
less.
I?
Preach.
How can I kind of connect with that in what I'm doing? And then it's looking at all right, what are the different takes and then, growing up reading comics from the 90s through the 2000s, there was a period, and there's still some artists out there who have like same face, where if you take away all the colors, all their women look the same and all their men look the same. And I've never had the delusion that, I'm the best artist out there, or that I have the prettiest line, or that there's something about my art that elevates it in a way. Someone like an Olivier Coipel or a Stuart Immonen, someone who's just, I think, a master of the form. So I'm like, what can I do that feels like something that I can accomplish that is distinct? And it's trying to find what is a look that each of the characters will have, whether that's hair, nose, face shape, eyes. I try and find like what's a look that each one has so that they're different. And I line them up kind of on a character design sheet and try and stay consistent with that. What's a haircut that feels right? I mean, even when I was drawing Paige, and I don't know if I've ever said this before, but I'm sure you won't mind, I texted Connor Goldsmith from time to time, being like, because I know he's a huge Paige fan, and I was like, would Paige wear something like this or like that? Like, people who have an even stronger connection and or an understanding of kind of the history. Like there's spots I know and there's spots that I know I have a blank spot on. So I've looked to see what people are talking about and how they identify with the character, and then trying to make choices on how kind of the character generally is holistically, and hopefully those choices work, and hopefully it creates a distinct look and a feeling. And someone like Maddie, like one of the first things I ever got was like some sort of I don't know if it was it Fleer 94, like the Inferno card that was a painted card by, I'm blanking on the artist at this moment, but it was just like, oh shit, look at that, or Mark Silvestri drawings of Maddie from Inferno, just things that were just like burned into my brain of like, that is the coolest, sexiest design I've ever seen in my life.
You also just nail facial expressions so well. Like when I think
Oh,
of
thank
your
you.
art, I see like a face. How do you draw upon that face? Like, I mean, again, like I don't know. It's one of those things where I don't know. I know you've said in the past that like Turner is your like inspiration, has been
Mhm.
one of your favorites out there, and I think Turner also had that where you'd look. I'm thinking of the Superman, Batman,
Mhm.
with Supergirl. Issues with Doomsday and just the facial expressions of that. And even when Turner did Turner do the Charmed comic?
I don't think so, but he
I
might have
don't.
done a variant cover at some
Yeah, I
point
think it was
early
right
on.
before
Yeah.
he passed.
Hmm.
But man, it's just like I see that and I'm like, oh, I see, the
Yeah.
character that this is supposed to be, and it's all
Uh,
face.
yeah, I use a lot of reference when I draw, and I literally just have my phone, and I've got a tripod here off to the side. I'll put a timer on, and then I will just kind of act out the dialogue of that panel and trying to get the emotion inside me, and then kind of hit my timer at some point, and then take a picture because as much as I can be like draw angry or draw happy, I can draw those, but when I act it out and try and get that feeling from the inside out, there's subtleties that I do with my face and body that I would never think of, or anyone, right? It's not just me, but like, yeah, so then when I have that reference photo, I'll just pull it up as I draw it and pick out those distinct things that, again, I would not have thought to, like, tweak his shoulder this way, or that's what's happening with the muscles in that eye, or just trying really hard to get that expression across. My goal as an artist is always, when my writer does a lettering pass, they remove dialogue because my characters are acting so well or so strong or so clearly, they need less dialogue to communicate what's happening. And whether or not that happens, that's just always my goal: is can my characters say more with their body and face than they need to in dialogue?
How did you find out about Astonishing? What was that meeting, call, email like? And were you like, holy shit, we're finally going to be reuniting the Generation X cast, which you all are the first time the Generation X cast has had a proper reunion.
Yeah. I was asked to do an arc of X-Men from the Ashes Infinity that Alex Packnadel was writing. It was the second arc, which was...
We love Alex. We just had him on the pod.
Yeah, Alex is great. And it was the Alex Maddie Limbo arc that kind of set up X Factor, Mark Russell and Bob Quinn's X Factor. And right off the bat, Alex and I hit it off, and he really liked the work I was doing. I got asked to draw the next three, which is the Omega Red arc, Samoset, which is a really one of my favorite stories we've ever done. And then and then it just started to be like, all right, you come back in a couple issues, and then draw the Beast arc. And as I was doing that, Alex was like, yeah, we're kind of keeping you like on as the main artist for this book, and we're gonna relaunch it here a short time out is the plan. And as we got a little bit closer, and I was talking to him and Darren Shan, our editor, it was like, yeah, we're gonna do Astonishing X-Men. And I was, before I even knew it was a Gen X reunion book, just the title alone was huge, because my favorite X-Men comic of all time is Astonishing X-Men, and problematic creators aside, it is still like my favorite. And Grant is like my second.
Dick. Sorry. No. I had to interview him at Wizard Magazine, and he almost got me fired. All because I had to ask him. By the way, it wasn't even my question. And I've said this story on the podcast before. They asked me to ask him about Wonder Woman at the time, and he got so angry. I was like, fuck you. And it was kind of weird. How can you love Buffy? How can you love Astonishing X-Men so much? And then the person behind it is like the biggest D-bag. Sorry.
Yeah, no, 100%. It's been a really difficult, like, how do I organize those things in my brain, because Buffy is a hugely influential piece of media on me, and then so many of their comics were great. But yeah, so to be like, oh shit, I get to step into the Astonishing shoes, my favorite title, and we can talk positively about John Cassidy's art, because it's amazing and
beautiful.
is super nice guy. I met him once, and I don't know of anything necessarily problematic about him. So
no, but God rest on him. Yes. I was at New York Comic Con when he had just passed, and they had a little shrine for him, and it was very, man, Astonishing X-Men, like, that was an era. He set the vibe.
Very much so. That book he made that book what it is. So but yeah, so I was excited to be able to step into the shoes of like my all-time favorite run, and then finding out it's going to be like basically a Gen X reunion book was so cool. And there was a lot of talk and discussion, especially with Alex and Darren, about like who can we use, who can't we use, who is where, who is not where. And even the final issue, we got to bring in everyone we could for like basically a couple panels at the end. And I think as Alex was working on that, I reached out. I was like, hey, are we going to have a chance to like call in some reinforcements on this? And he was like, wasn't planning on doing that, but let me see what I can do. And then when I got the script, he had rewritten the ending to incorporate that. And it was so cool. We even had, I don't know if I just slightly talking out of turn, we had Monet in the panel at one point. And then our editor was like, oh wait, she's in Grey Malkin prison right now. And I was like, shit. Like, I had penciled Monet in the panel, and like, going back to favorite characters, Monet might be my favorite character, but I always see her as like an X Factor character, because that is like Peter David's X Factor run where I fell in love with Monet. So out of context, she feels like an X Factor character. But yeah. So
release the Monet cut. Release the Monet cut. No,
I have to go back.
It's so interesting that you said that, because one of the things that I never conceptualized until we had Cena Grace on the podcast. Mm-hmm. Cena was like, for a certain issue of Iceman, I think he wanted Emma at the time, and they're like, Emma's busy, and Cena was like, what's she busy with? She's a fictional character, but for folks at home who probably don't know that kind of stuff, and that's the magic sauce with continuity, and both the blessing and the curse is that characters like Monet and Emma can't make it into that final, couple panels. Was Emma in those final panels of your Astonishing?
Not in the finals. I think it was the second or third arc of the story
Yeah,
with the like blue collar worker who turns himself into the Hulk. We had Emma
yeah.
show up at the
She
end because
pops
they were
in.
in Chicago, which is where Eve's
Exceptional.
Exceptional was taking place. So yeah,
Yeah.
we got to bring Emma in. We got to bring just about everyone in one way or the other. And Monet was the only one we couldn't snag because of other continuity issues that she couldn't just magically disappear from prison. So
I love though that you said that you see her as an X Factor character because the Peter David early to mid aughts X Factor
Mhm.
is such a great book. I
So
mean,
good.
especially post House of M, they were
Yeah.
the only. I mean, again, Familia, you have to understand, they were not tackling the decimation in the books.
Yeah.
The X Men were reacting to. X Factor was the only team that was like, "What is going on here?" Going out
Yep.
and actively trying to find answers to what happened on M Day.
Yeah, no, and I read that book month to month, pretty much from the launch of X Factor Investigations all the way through, at least through issue 50, and then they went back to classic numbering. And I think about that was when I stepped off, and not for quality, it just felt like issue 50 wrapped a perfect bow on this story, and I was like, I'm good. And it was the like coming back around as like how Layla Miller knows everything, and that little perfect kind of circuity to this story was absolutely incredible, and everyone should read it.
That issue with Siren giving birth to
Oh,
baby
so
Sean.
good.
And you know, we thankfully did have an interview with Peter David where he was telling us that the idea of a mutant being born following
Mhm.
M Day wasn't really discussed until Messiah Complex. And so
Yep.
the problem was they had Siren pregnant. And
Okay.
so last minute they're like, "Oh, what if it's a dupe and the baby gets reabsorbed?"
Yeah.
Horrified
Yeah, it was.
again. But that's what good comics. I'm sorry to say it like that, but like that's what good comics should do. They should rattle you at some points, and you
Mhm.
take some kind of lesson there. And I think that is a X Factor is a masterclass. That version of X Factor is a masterclass in storytelling.
Yeah, there was a couple of years ago. It was like 2016, so actually 10 years ago at this point.
Oh
Teeny
God.
Howard and I were in Baltimore for Comic Con, and we got going on our favorite, and we got so loud shrieking about how great X Factor was because it's both some of our favorites. It was like 2 in the morning. We got security called on us because we were being so loud. We were waking up people around us. We were like, "Oh, sorry, we just got going, and we didn't realize like how loud we were getting because we were so like excited and loved that run so much."
I want to party with you and Teeny in 2016 and gagging over how great X Factor was.
It was fantastic.
You know, I think post Krakoa, it was very difficult for a lot of readers to engage with From the Ashes. But one of the
Mhm.
things that you all did so well, and specifically your art, and this is where I want to make sure you adequately get your flowers. So I'm sorry for like
Thank you.
for gushing here. You've made them feel like the X-Men again that we were returning to this era, especially with like Paige and Sean and Skin and everyone. It You all really brought that, and I think there was so much dishearts. What am I trying to say here? I think a lot of people were very sad when Astonishing wasn't continuing because it was one of those things that you can get on your unlimited app, and it's
Mhm.
so good. I mean, it's not even just the writing because I think a lot of folks forget that the art has to be in sync. You have to have chemistry between the writer and the artist. And you and Alex, why do I think Tim was also a writer
Yeah.
for it? He was a
So
writer.
Tim was alternating arcs with Eduardo and Adino. I'm trying to think of Eduardo's last name. Super super cool, amazing guy. They were alternating arcs with us, and then at the
Okay.
very end,
I'm not making
Eduardo
that
and
up.
I
Okay.
switched. So I got to do the last arc or so with Tim when it switched over to the Age of Revelation stuff.
Okay.
Um,
But I mean, it's just like your panels are just electric.
Thanks. Yeah, the Infinity format is very challenging in that it is a fixed format. You can't do a lot of the same things you can do in a traditional paginated comic, but because of the vertical scroll idea and interface, there's a lot of different things you can do in the way, essentially, the motion of moving a comic up and vertically scrolling with your phone. There's different ways you can reveal information. There's different way characters can move across a page. And having some really good friends of mine who did a bunch of work at Webtoon, that I got to watch them draw and develop
Oh my
this
God, I forgot about
storytelling
Webtoon.
approach. Yeah, right. They're still around,
Wow.
actually.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, but I was watching them draw stuff in like, the 2016, 2017 and be like, "Oh, look at all the cool stuff you can do with that format." So when I got hired years later at Marvel, I don't think there were too many artists at the time who were quite taking advantage of the navigation and native nature of the vertical scroll because, again, it was a new thing for Marvel and you didn't have artists coming from Webtoon. But I had done some work for Webtoon and again, got to see a lot of really cool people do stuff. So I was able to bring in some of that, and then I started to see more and more artists they hired utilize the different ways in which you can and do that format. So it's really fun, but also there's sometimes it's limiting. I was like, man, I just want a wide shot of all these characters, just like a cool establishing shot and like a splash page. And there were panels I had where essentially I wanted so much space, I drew a splash page and then shrunk it down to the tiny confines of a vertical scroll because I would get everything in I wanted.
Well, it's funny because I think Marvel was struggling for a little bit to just how to make digital comics a thing or digital only comics a thing because
Hmm.
I remember when iPad 1 came out and they did, was it Infinite Comics where you kind of scrolled and it looked a
Yeah.
little bit more like
Hmm.
animation and it didn't work.
Yep.
There was just something. So again, I think getting an artist like you and knowing and understanding how you're supposed to tell the story in that vertical format, I mean, they lucked out. I mean, truly. I mean, this format is doing well because of your art and other
Oh,
artists
thank you.
like
Yeah.
you. I am curious of what happens if, and this is my own ignorance, I'm not asking for any
Sure.
inside tea or anything, but
No,
what
you're good.
happens, let's say if my wish list, they want to get Astonishing X-Men in trade paperback, how do they themselves reformat that? Would you get like another pass at trying to make it like a print version? Like, what is it? Do talks like that even happen? I'm just curious.
Yeah, no, there's a different department that decides, like sales wise, if they want to bring Infinity to the print market, and then they work with their digital team. And I don't 100% know who on the digital team reformats everything, but they do a really good job of like cutting and pasting everything together. And then oftentimes I will get a chance to see it as like a proof before it goes
Oh,
to the printer. There's been some that I haven't seen, and that's fine. Like there's so many like different moving parts. But I remember there was, I think it was, yeah, it was the first one of From the Ashes. I got a chance to look at it ahead of time and give one or two quick notes of just like, oh, this panel here, maybe tweak this or that. But generally, they have a team that is really, really adept at cutting and reformatting those into print. So usually they'll do a couple print issues where they'll collect roughly 6 Infinity comics into like an oversized issue, and then From the Ashes is getting a trade paperback here that comes out in May. So they're taking all the issues, the entire digital run, and putting it in a trade, and that's one of the first like Infinity comics that has been put in a complete trade. So fingers crossed, Astonishing comes along. I don't have any secret knowledge ahead of time because sometimes I wouldn't even know they were doing it till I saw the solicits, and I was like, "Oh, dope! This one finally gets in print." I did about 3 years worth of Marvel work that rarely saw print because I was doing strictly Infinity, but now they've started to print a whole bunch more of my stuff, and it's been really exciting to see it kind of make its way onto the shelf.
I I having Infinity on the app I think is such a great thing for what we were talking about earlier with accessibility
Mhm.
and these characters. The market has just changed so much. I mean, I just in this conversation, I'm sort of like wowed that there were times where we didn't know anything. I have holes in my knowledge for a character like Magma because
Yeah,
all I had for Magma was that little Fleer Ultra card with
exactly.
no issues of the, no issues from New Mutants. And then maybe UncannyXmen.net had updated the
Oh yeah.
bio and I could read a little bit. And now it's such a different game because you have these comics that you can just get in there right now, and they're free to. Well, the whole library is free, but these
Mhm.
original stories that are right there, and the characters are so accessible, and you can like click on the character and follow along on their Marvel page, and it's just a whole different landscape. And you're at the forefront of that because, and I just find it so fascinating from your career standpoint. And I'm sorry for like babbling, but you start off as a kid who doesn't know where to get the next issue, who these
Mhm.
characters are, and now you're leading the charge on a platform like Marvel Unlimited and creating that accessibility for those newer readers.
Yeah, it's really exciting to be a part of that, and kind of the way I think every week they add a huge chunk of a backlog of their the entire Marvel catalog. I think there's well over like 150,000 copies comics available on the app. So at the click of a button, anyone who has a subscription can read 60 years of continuity. I know there's podcasts. I think the Escape the Mojoverse podcast did like a 100 issue reread of New
No,
Mutants
they
the other
have.
year because they were like, oh, we haven't read this one yet, so we're gonna. I'm like, that is a lot of work. And back in the day, there was no way for us to get 100 issues unless we like
No.
back issue dove. Trades weren't even a regular thing for Marvel until like the early 2000s, late 90s. So
Morrison is when I really started collecting trades.
yeah.
I mean, I had like whatever, like sporadic ones, like the Rogue and
Mm-hmm.
Gambit ones, but Morrison, that's when I started saying, okay, volume one, volume two, and all that
Yeah, no,
stuff.
they're out there now, and it's so much easier to just binge a huge run of content, which is great.
One of my favorite issues that you did was the Hope and Jean issue with
Hmm.
Cable. And listen, I was working at Wizard when I knew Hope Summers was originally supposed to be Jean Grey reincarnated. So I love the very few times that they get to share panels, and
Yeah.
you did that duo such good justice. But the one thing that that stands out for me is that they're in Grand Central, and you nailed something specific about Grand Central, and it's in the background. It's not the focal point of the panel. It's the lighting that you were able to nail and create that tone and atmosphere. And I'm curious, how do you approach tone and atmosphere, especially with a writer that you're probably working with for the first time?
Yeah, it's kind of a multi-stage process, and sometimes it's just having the right creative team. Like Cece De La Cruz colored me on those issues, and Cece is one of the best colorists I've ever worked with. And I've worked with some good ones. That is no shade to anyone else, but this was, I think, Cece's first Marvel work. It was my first Marvel work.
Go Cece.
When I saw her colors, I was like, holy shit! Like this is. Not only are you nailing like the vibrancy that I love to see in superhero comics and that I love my work to be colored, but you have like tone and emotion and lighting that does stuff. So much of that lighting probably came from Cece. Like I used a ton of reference photos for Grand Central to make sure I got it right. And obviously Thorin's script was really, really fun. And that was my first Marvel project, and I was so excited to do it. But yeah, I owe so much to that team. Just like we all worked together really, really well. I remember really early on, it's just 2 issues. But after the first issue, it's Hope. Danny Moonstar was in that first issue. I knew Jean was coming up. I emailed Thorin, and we'd never really spoken before. This is like my first Marvel work. I was like, I know this is presumptuous of me, but if I never get to draw Marvel again, I was like, is there a way to fit Cable into this story? He's my favorite X-Men character. I just want to draw him. I think Thorin, it took her a week or 2 to get back, and it was fine. It was one of those, like, we are so busy people, but she was like, oh, so sorry, it took me a second to get back to you. Yeah, I'll find a way to work Cable in. And then when I got her script, I remember just like jumping up and down in my office and getting emotional because it worked so well. And she was like, yeah, I hadn't planned to put Cable in there, but as soon as I was like, Cable should be here, she was like, there was no other way to end this book than bringing Cable and Hope together for the little heist they had there at the last issue. And it was so cool and so gratifying again to work with a really collaborative, amazing team. And then obviously Cece's colors were just knocking it out of the park. So
How did you feel about Cable in X-Men 97, that moment with Maddie right before Genosha?
yeah, the X-Men 97 was fantastic, and to see my special boy come back and obviously have Maddie in the book too, like in the cartoon too. It's great. I'm excited. I need to rewatch it before the next season comes out. It's been a while.
Yeah, summer 2026, I believe. And that's not Inside Tea I have. I think Disney Plus put it
I think
there.
they posted it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I can show you this one here for the people seeing the video, but like literally off to the side of my desk. And we've talked about this, but it's my cable X-Men 97 Cable guy. So he watches over me at all times.
The Chris Potter ate with that role, and I was just talking to him the other day, and I don't hear Gambit anymore. I hear Cable, and I just thought, there's always that philosophy with Cable that he's, more Terminator, time traveling mercenary, and then also balancing the messianic Messiah, figure that he is. And I just think his voice in 97 captures it so well.
Yeah. No, Cable to me always is the dad who suffered trauma that doesn't want his children to suffer the same thing.
Yeah.
And that's what I absolutely love about Cable, and kind of capturing that level of emotion and intensity was fantastic.
What's your favorite Cable costume? Or which is your favorite Cable costume? Sorry.
Oh, good question. I mean,
Sorry.
obviously,
We
like
ask, we ask the hard questions here at Power of X-Men.
the Messiah Complex era, like Dave Finch drawing Cable is with Baby Hope strapped to the chest, is so iconic and so cool. I loved like the Spear of Destiny era Cable, which is also like like the fighting. Which fighting game was that? Where the costume with like the blue and then
The Marvel versus Capcom?
the Marvel versus Capcom one.
2.
That one is fantastic.
New Age of Heroes. Sorry.
No, I love it. Those are some of my favorite ones. Like, and that's the thing I love about Cable is because he doesn't have a defined like this is his costume. Every time you draw him, you can find a new way to do it that's crazier and cooler than the last one. And he kind of there's just the excess is the hallmark of Cable. Like I love the like scuba diving Cable action figure is like my favorite figure. It's the coolest one.
That is the best one. Philip, I'm so angry because I was going through my toys and I couldn't find that one. And I think I left it at Line Drive Paper and Comics back in the day. That was like my favorite Cable as well.
It's so cool.
Yeah,
I think it's one of the few ones I don't have. I have just about all the Cables of that time. I've bought them in the last couple of years. I've got all the Marvel Legend ones, but I need to go back and get Scuba Dive Cable.
How do you feel about Nate Gray? AKA the best X character ever.
AKA the best X character ever. I don't have the same emotional attachment, but I'm like, is he a Cable? Then yes, of course, I love him. He's amazing. And his costume design and the fucking like Warren Ellis, was it Steve Pugh era, like the no shirt, open trench coat. The fact that we never got the Chris Anka like sexy X-Men miniseries he pitched at one point is just the biggest tragedy ever because he's the best.
That devastates me. Yeah, I think like when I just think about like the Summers family and their drama and the different levels, I think a lot of it is encapsulated for me with Cable and that relationship with Strife. And I think about the adventures of Cyclops and Phoenix in that last moment with Cable, and this epitomizes why I love Cable so much, is at that very end when Jean and Scott are fading back to the present, and he's screaming like, "Don't leave me, please don't leave me," and Scott is like, "Well, I'm going to get emotional thinking about it. It's like, we'll always be with you." And it just sets up Cable as a kid who was so scared to the time traveling fugitive he becomes. And when you hear Cyclops say in AVX where it's like, I wanted my children to become more than these time traveling fugitives. I wanted mutants to use their powers other than fighting robots sent to kill us. It's a beautiful arc. I mean, it truly is. So I think Cable is emblematic of that. Sorry.
No, it's fantastic. I absolutely, he's my favorite, and there's just so many incredible moments. Even in Kieran's final couple issues in Krakoa era, where Hope's going off to like save everything, and Cable just pops in basically to give her the thumbs up, and it's just like the tiniest moment. It absolutely means everything to me, and kind of that relationship to see the Cyclops to Cable, and then Cable to Hope, just kind of each generation trying to do better than the last, and still always trying to save everyone.
So, Shadows of Tomorrow, which book are you going to be illustrating? Sorry.
No,
that was me trying to be sneaky. Because your work, I mean, what do you have upcoming? Because it's so good.
Thank you. I've got a couple of different things across the board. We can start in like the X-Men.
Yeah.
It hasn't been officially announced, but like they don't really do a lot of announcements. I am going to draw a couple issues of Steve Orlando's X-Men Infinity comic that he's doing right now. Kind of the evergreen, just like anyone can pick this up book. I'm starting on it probably tomorrow. I know what's happening, and my editor Darren reached out to me again. We hadn't worked together for a few months, and he was like, "Hey, do you want to draw a couple issues of this? Here's what's happening." And I was like, damn it, Darren, I don't have the time in my schedule, but the fact is you knew how to lure me in, so I can't say what it is, but it'll be cool. It'll be really fun. Just a couple issues there. I'm doing a project for Boom right now that hasn't officially been announced, but if anyone on the internet, PRH posts their stuff so far in advance of solicits, that information is out there. It's a really cool property. I'll be working on some stuff this summer. I'm drawing it right now. I just did my first cover for them just this week. Let's see, there's a couple other things that I can't quite mention, just like little projects or side projects or indies or pitches. My partner and I just finished the first issue of a creator-owned series that we're going to bring to Kickstarter in the spring.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, yeah.
Congrats.
Thank you. It's a
That's
32
so,
page issue. Yeah.
I love hearing that.
No, it's really exciting. We had some creator-owned stuff. We've done some stuff together in anthologies over the years. They've done quite a few anthologies in comics, just on the side for fun. And we had a moment where kind of an idea came together that lined up with time and an opening in my schedule, and we spent the last 3 months working on it. So it's a fantasy comic, very heavy on the sex and epic kind of narrative nature of it, trying to find kind of a fun marrying of both, like not exactly romantasy, but like things about like sex and erotica while marrying it with epic fantasy stuff. So we'll bring that to Kickstarter here later this spring. It's all drawn, it's all written. We're going to get it colored, at least the first couple pages for the initial announcement. And pretty soon I'll start sending that around to creators to show them ahead of time and kind of get some feedback slash hype for when we roll out the pre-launch page on Kickstarter. But we're still a little bit away right now. I finished that up luckily right before my schedule got crazy busy, so we have a little bit of time to make sure it's polished up before we launch the Kickstarter, while I'm drawing like 3 books at the same time for the next couple months.
So you basically have no life.
Yep. Yep, it's the ups and downs of comics, right? There's sometimes a couple months where things are really quiet, and then you have a couple months where you are like pushed to the max. But it forces you to do different things and find different approaches to solving the problems of comics as you're drawing them.
I know where to find you online, but for the folks listening at home, where can they find you online?
Sure. Instagram, I'm Philip Sevy Comic Art. I am on Blue Sky at Philip Sevy, and those are kind of the two main touch points. I have a website that I need to update. It's just philipsevy.com. I've been so busy drawing for a few years that it's kind of been neglected. I'm just sitting on it at this point.
Because you're working all the time, drawing all the time.
Exactly.
You have no life. You can't do something like update your website.
No. I had
Oh,
when
gosh.
I did a class visit in SCAD last weekend, and the professor pulled up my website in the background, and I was like, oh shit, like none of my Marvel work is even on here. Like I haven't touched it in like 5 years. So I need to update. I actually just applied for a New York Comic Con table today.
Wait,
And
really?
yeah. The applications just went live this morning for Artist Alley.
Oh, that's so
So
exciting. That's my Comic Con. The New York Comic
yeah,
Con's mine. Oh my
yeah.
God. I'm going to fanboy out
I
if I
haven't
see
been
you
in a couple
IRL.
years. No, I'm excited. It's been, I think 2023 was the last time I was there. So I'm excited to come back. Hopefully this year, fingers crossed, I get accepted. You never know. But yeah, if I do get accepted, I'll be there. I'll be at San Diego Comic Con this year as well. That's probably about the amount of conventions I'm doing this year. Maybe a few more next year. I love cons, but also it's been nice. I haven't done very many for the last couple of years, and it's been nice to just spend my extra weekends and time like going on a hike or something instead of sitting in a con.
Yeah, I mean, I love cons so much, and I started doing a lot more than I typically would have done when I started Power of X-Men, but I've never been a con person just because my
Okay.
life is all events, and the
Yeah.
last thing you want to do is an event. And they're really intense, but
Yep.
man, are they rewarding. They're fun. And Familia, go check out your local cons, support your
Yeah.
artists there. Philip, we do have a new segment here at Power of X-Men where we are asking folks to have a minute or two to discuss what they think the power of X-Men is, the power that the X-Men brand has, not the podcast. But so, what do you think what do you think is the power of X-Men?
I'm sure my answer is very similar to other people who've spoken on it, but essentially, I think the power I find in X-Men, or the power I think X-Men has, is that it is a place that gives voice to those who do not feel they have a voice among the public, minoritized groups. People who feel othered, people who feel alone, and that can be anyone along the spectrum. But specifically, it is a place I think that gives people a place where they feel like they can belong, where differences are embraced and encouraged, not abused or turned away, and where power comes from those differences. Where I think in our society so much we depower or try to take away power of those who are different. X-Men is the complete opposite. The metaphor is the differences we have between each other is what make us powerful and what make us strong and what make us special, which I think is the message the world needs. And if right now, especially, I find so many systems of power trying to fight against that idea, when we as individuals understand and should continue to embrace and fight for the idea that what makes us different is what makes us powerful. So that's what I think X-Men embodies.